Hello Year 9, it's Miss Smith here. So as you might have gathered already, that your next unit of work is about the theme of literary islands. So I'm hoping that the first activities have already got you thinking about beautiful and interesting islands and what you might do if you were stranded on one. It might make you think of some islands that you've visited in the past already yourself. Um, the Desert Island Discs activity might have come quite easily to some of you if you've been listening to lots of music and reading during lockdown to keep yourself busy. I think actually our experiences over the last couple of months with not being able to get about as much as we're used to and feeling restricted might help some of us empathise with some of the characters and the feelings that they might experience in the stories that we're going to encounter in the coming lessons. So it might give us quite a useful perspective on some of these characters and some of the remote and isolated settings that they're placed in. So the other activity that you've just completed got you thinking about some different island settings. So these ones. So you were asked to look at some images and consider which island you thought looked most interesting and which one you think would be the most interesting setting for a story. So these are the same images as the ones that you had on a slide. They're in a slightly different order here, but they're the same ones. So you might have selected two different images for those two different activities, or you might have selected the same ones. It doesn't matter. You might have picked this image here on the bottom left of the screen. You might have been interested in that island. I would have done, I think, for that first question of which island did you find interesting. I do find that little cluster of islands there to be very interesting. I'm really interested in the shape of them. I'm sort of interested in the geography of them. I'm wondering if they're habitable islands, if they're the kinds of place where there's spots on those islands where people could settle and live. I'm interested in the nature of those islands and what grows there and what kinds of wildlife there might be, if any, and the plant life. And also the turquoise waters made them look really beautiful. So I'm really kind of want to know a little bit more about those islands. I think I'd quite like to visit there. I don't know if I'd like to stay there for a long time, but I'd definitely like to visit. Okay, so the next question was a slightly different one. It kind of felt the same, but it was asking you to think with a slightly different emphasis. The next question that you got was asking you to pick one of these four islands and consider which one would make a good setting for a story. So it's given you a bit of a different focus. You're starting to think about not just your personal response to an island, but you're thinking about the choices that a writer might make. So you're thinking about the writer's craft, and you're thinking about why your writer might choose a particular setting and what kind of effect it might have or what it might add to the plot. So I was trying to get you to think a little bit differently. Okay, so again, I might stick with this setting if I wanted to, this one on the bottom left corner. And I might decide that if I wanted to use that in a story, I could have some characters who are trapped there. Maybe they've been shipwrecked. And I would think that I could develop this into some sort of adventure story or something about survival, because it does look quite remote. So I'd be using that in terms of how could they escape? What could that add to my plot? I might dismiss two of the islands. I'm less interested in that one, and maybe not this one, because they look too close to mainland or possibly too close to some other island. So if I was going for an adventure story or a kind of stranded on an island kind of story, they're not going to be that useful really, because my characters could probably get rescued quite easily, couldn't they? And then there would be no dilemma, no problem in the narrative. So I might lose my reader's interest. So I might not have picked those ones if I was going for adventure. You might have picked some of the other ones though, due to the fact that they actually are near other islands or are near mainland. You might have thought that that might be a good choice if you wanted to write a story where you've got conflict between two different places. You could maybe use some of those islands that are near to other places, because you could have a war or a political situation unfolding between characters on different islands. Or you might have chosen one of those islands with the idea of banishing a character or characters to it as a form of punishment, or as a way to kind of test the character of the person who's been banished to the island. Okay, I don't know, some of you might recognise this island on the bottom right. If any of you have been on holiday to Crete ever in Greece, you might recognise this island. It's an island called Spinalonga, and it's just off the island of Crete. And until the 1950s, it was a leper colony. So people who were suffering from leprosy were sent there so that they couldn't spread the disease. So they had to kind of give up their life on the island of Crete and move there. So you might want to choose an island like that if you wanted to write more of a historical story and you wanted to bring a bit of the past into it, or if you wanted to write a tragic story or a story that was going to really have an emotional pull and conflict in that way. There are actually many stories about that island. And if you have been to Crete and you have visited the island at Spinalonga, you might know some of those. But quite recently there was a book written, a novel by the writer Victoria Hislop called The Island, and that's set there. And actually it's a love story, which you might think might be an unusual choice of story for an island set, a story set on an island that was once a leper colony. But I'm hoping that I'm getting you thinking now about some of the ways that writers might use an island setting in a story. So they can be really beautiful places, they could be really wild places, potentially dangerous places. We've got this idea of them being remote places where adventure could happen, where banishment or conflict could happen, and so on. So this is the kind of thing that we're going to be thinking about this week, this idea of why writers might use islands and what might happen there. Okay, the idea of using an island as a setting is a really good one, because what you're doing as a writer is you're taking your characters away from normal society. You might be removing characters from family or friends, so you're kind of setting them free perhaps, but equally if you're placing them on an island and they can't leave that island, you're trapping them and restraining them. But also, I mean, just glancing at these images that we've got here, you could see some of these islands are quite small, so if you place a group of characters in these small restricted places, you've got quite a lot of scope for conflict. So you can see there that this is a good setting for a story, really, if you can think about what you might develop your plot into. The island could be a really good start. Okay, so before you go back to the activities on the PowerPoint and work through your booklet, we're going to play a quick game to see what you already know about islands in literature and stories. Okay, so on this next screen there are 7 stories, so they could be stories from novels, stories from plays, or stories from films. So you're looking for 7 stories that feature an island predominantly as their setting. Okay, so what you might want to do in a minute when I finish speaking is just pause the video, have a look, have a think. What have you read or what have you seen? You might have read some of them or watched some of them at school, or you might have watched them at home or seen some of them in the theatre. So have a think back to what you've seen and what you've experienced and what you've read. And then just jot down the 7 that you think feature islands. And when you come back, when you're ready, when you think you've got the right 7, if you press play again, I'll tell you the answers. Okay, so you've had a little chance to have a think and use your own knowledge, because obviously I've spoken a little bit about islands and about what I think about them, but you're bringing a lot of your own knowledge to this unit of work as well, because you will have encountered island settings in a lot of your reading and a lot of your watching of television and films and things. So be confident to rely on your own knowledge as well. Okay, so let's have a look. First one then, way back, Peter Pan. Okay. Does feature an island, that's Neverland. Okay, so if you've got that, you're right. Swiss Family Robinson, which is quite old as well, so some of you might be less familiar with that one, but there is a Disney film version of it, I think, as well as it being a novel, and that features a family that are shipwrecked, I think, on an island. Lord of the Flies, one of my favourites. Absolutely brilliant novel. We're going to have a look at extracts from that later on in this unit of work. Some of you might have read bits of it already. There's 2 different film versions of it, I think, and it has also been a theatre play, but we've got a group of boys who are travelling by plane and their plane crashes and they land on an island. There's no female characters, just boys, and no grown-ups for the majority of the novel, so you can have a little bit of a think about what might happen there. Okay, next one, Kinsuke's Kingdom, which I think some of you might have read it, Key Stage 3. I haven't actually read it. I feel like a bit of a fraud pressing it. I've not read it. We'll try to get around to it one day. Next one, The Tempest by William Shakespeare, set on an island, and again we'll be looking at passages from that as we go through this unit, so you've got that to look forward to. Castaway film, again I've not seen this one, I've seen clips of it. Tom Cruise is in it and washed up on an island with only, I think, football for company, but some of you will know that one better than me, and you'll know the kinds of things that happen to him, the challenges that he faces and how he survives. And then possibly the most famous and possibly the novel that kind of sets the sort of precedent and the stereotypical view of the desert island narrative is this one, Robinson Crusoe. Okay, so I'm assuming, since I don't know otherwise, that you also got 7 out of 7 and you are also perfect, so well done you. The other ones do not feature island settings predominantly, they have different kinds of settings. Okay, so I'm hoping that as you went through that activity, you kind of thinking, yeah, I know a little bit about that, or you could kind of picture the island, or you kind of had a sense of the story. So I do want to encourage you to feel confident as we do this unit, because you will know a little bit already about desert island settings or island settings, things like Neverland, that idea of going to an island as a sort of fantasy and a magical, enchanting place, or that idea from Robinson Crusoe and Lord of the Flies and Castaway of someone being washed up on an island and it being a story of adventure and survival. So keep what you know in mind as we go on through this week's lessons, because it will really help you. Okay, the last thing that I want to say to you before I finish here is just to remind you about this. In your booklet you've got this sheet that's like a map, and all I want you to be doing this week is to kind of have that close at hand all the time. So when you're watching a video or you're working through a lesson and you have ideas about how islands are used in literature or how they're presented, just keep jotting down ideas. And again, if you're going through the lesson and you think, oh yeah, I did read a story a couple of years ago and that had an island, and things start to come back to you, just jot it down on there, so you're kind of building up all of this, these really detailed notes and all of these ideas about how islands are used in literature. Okay, so if you leave the video now and you go back to the PowerPoint, and you can pick up the rest of the lesson from slide 6. Okay, thanks very much everyone, bye.